Chris Parker,
Oh,
welcome to Between Two Beers.
thanks for having me.
We're excited to have you. We're in the Export Beer Garden studio tonight. Chris, the end of book week launch?
Book
launch week.
Book launch week?
Book launch week, yeah.
Has it been quite exexhausting?
I am shattered, actually. I'm sick of talking about myself, but I'm
Oh,
like,
that bodes well.
I know. We're about to get it's like I thought I climbed the mountain and now I'm like, oh no, I'm looking at Everest. But no, it's crazy. I've done a lot of publicity in media before, especially like with like Treasure Island or any of those shows. But this is on another level. I guess because it's a book, there's a level of sort of sophistication. You get in access to other places like RNZ or whatever. You know, you get to talk to Kim Hill because you've written a book.
Yeah, so I want to talk to you about that. It's got to be surreal, right? Like, Kim Hill is one of the nation's best broadcasters. Yeah. You do 30 minutes with her, which we both listen to, and she's sort of just probing away at your love life.
Yeah.
Like, what is the situation?
Just Michael content, the whole 30
She's
minutes.
obsessed. Or she's bored too. I mean, everyone's sort of bored, aren't they, in their jobs? And she's like, oh, listen, I don't care who's listening to this. I just want to have a talk to someone. When she's in there a lot, what I've learned like through all of these interviews is like, most people in media are just absolutely off their rocker insane. You know, like they're all nuts. Like none of them. And it's so funny because they're in the job of reflecting human nature back to ourselves. Like, they're the one that's like, trying to be relatable for people listening, but they're all nuts. Like all of them are nuts. You go into every single radio room and they're just like, screaming at you. And it's like 8 a.m. in the morning. No one's behaving like that, but it's just their job and it's that personality type. But it's been amazing. Sort of, it's almost been like a case study of like, people who work in media, because I've met, I think, everyone.
Yeah. Is it just a week and done? Like, how long does it go on?
Oh, it's been sort of 2 weeks roughly, and sort of end of last week and this week now, and I think that's kind of done. But there's still bits and bobs. I mean, we're revving up till Christmas. Yeah. We want to be on that Christmas book list.
Yeah. Good timing. Where are you in the charts? Do you know where you are in the charts?
I think as of I found out from my publisher as of yesterday, because they count it from the book sales. I mean, this is the best thing about. Well, there's many great things about doing a book, but one of the interesting things is learning about how the book world works, because it's an industry like any other. So they take the sales from the middle, from like Sunday to Saturday of the week, so that you split weekends in case there's like a public holiday on one weekend or whatever. So I think my book's only been on sale for like 4 days, but I'm number 7 in the non-fiction list, which is apparently the competitive one, because you're dealing with your autobiographies, you're dealing with your cookbooks, you're dealing with, all that sort of stuff that people just want to read over Christmas. So I'm barging my way in there. Well, it's me versus Ruby Tui. Yeah, she's the number one. Yeah, which is amazing because like it's the number one book. Well, last week was like the number one book in the country was Ruby Tui's autobiography, and it's, it just goes to show the interest that we have in female sports now. Yeah. Because people would argue that maybe a couple of years ago there wouldn't be space for an autobiography from Ruby Tui, but it's like we want to hear that story.
Oh, she's a superstar.
And she is a superstar. Yeah.
And your book is really good. I've read it, and I really enjoyed it. I love the way that you write, and I've read that you sort of said, I've heard you say that the process of writing a book basically hung over you for a year.
Oh my gosh.
And I love the way you wrote the last chapter. It was almost like a celebratory, like, in real time, I'm doing this, I've done this, like, here's the completion of my book.
I wrote the last book, like, honestly, a week after having COVID, and my brain just fell out of my head. Like, I just could not think and could not finish it. And I was like, oh my God, I'm never gonna get this book finished. And there's lots of tears at the laptop just because I just wanted to be released off like the deadline of having to hand it all in. And then sort of inspiration struck where I was like, I'm just going to write it about me trying to finish this last chapter, and like the idea of, and then sort of writing in third person, I thought it was kind of a funny idea. Yeah. And just like that sort of because so much of it is, the content inside the book, but there is a layer above that book of like Chris trying to write a book, which you get little moments of that.
My rudimentary kind of understanding would be that you would write something linear, but is that the case, or do you just write whatever is in your head at the time?
I think it so depends on, what kind of book and where you are, but I think, so for like an autobiography, they just tell their story. Someone else might write it, or they might write it themselves, whereas this is not like a memoir or anything. It's like an extension of my comedy, so I I just sort of wrote with whatever idea was present at the time, and like stand up, I guess you might have a funny idea, and then, but weirdly, it has stuck pretty linear, like in terms of the way it was written. That's the kind of order those pieces were put in the book. We did sort of shuffle a few around, but
you got married 2 weeks ago.
I got married 2 weeks ago.
So one of my
it's a hell of a 3 weeks, by the way.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that soon. But one of my favorite passages in the book was your made-up traditions. So when people would inquire about your gay proposal and how the wedding works, you'd say some of the following, and I've written these down because they made me laugh.
I actually had some of these in my notes as genuine questions to ask.
Exactly.
So it's like, after you're proposed to, it's customary to propose back within a month, and it still has to be a surprise. This is what Chris would tell his friends who are inquiring. Legally, one of us has to register as a bride for the wedding. Whoever proposes is the one whose last name we get to have once we're married. Traditionally, the engagement ring when it's two men is a toe ring. The celebrant who marries us decides who will walk down the aisle and who stands at the altar waiting. And because there's no hens party, it becomes a gay tradition for the two grooms to have a paintball fight against each other before the wedding. And it made me laugh because I can imagine you telling me with a straight face, like me genuinely inquiring, and you saying that, and me going, oh, shit. Okay.
I love the sort of, because no one wants to put it wrong or get it wrong or offend you, but they are curious about it. And I guess in some ways it is like such a heterosexual industry and sort of infrastructure, the wedding, how that works. And so to have two men in it, there's obviously gaps or weird moments where you're like, oh, what the hell? Like, what happens there? And Michael and I always found ourselves coming at the sort of crossroads of being like, or do we just adapt what would be traditionally a man and a woman here, or do we do our own version? And that's our whole process of being married has been that. But along that way, I just love to have a bit of fun and just lie to people about what the traditions were, because I was like, I'm sick of like having to explain it sincerely. But it's amazing what people will believe as well. I think because they don't want to offend you.
Well, yeah, if it's an area outside your comfort zone, you will kind of just go with anything, and you'll go with the expert on the subject matter and go, oh, well, yeah, no, that must be
well, that was your question, wasn't it? How do they decide who walks down the aisle?
100%.
Celebrate.
Exactly. Well, we decided no aisle. And that was the best way to solve it, because the aisle is ridiculous. I mean, all of it is ridiculous. It's funny when you plan a wedding from the position of being two men, a same-sex relationship, you're like, why are we doing any of this?
Yeah.
Like,
did you deconstruct everything and then
the whole thing?
Right.
We got like a wedding structure, and we wrote it down on Post-it notes, and we sort of started jiggling it around and restructuring it, because I've emceed 6 weddings in my time, and so I have seen a fair share of them, and I've always thought the structure of the wedding was kind of wrong, because the ceremony is why we're all there, and it's 15 minutes up the top, and then it sort of finishes, and then we have this like endless reception where we talk to people that we don't really want to talk to, and have a sort of bad 3-course dinner, and then sort of dance the Grease Mega Mix, and then that's over. And I was like, surely there's a way that you can integrate the ceremony inside of the reception and draw that out, because that's why we're all there, and give a reason for people to be seated down and chatting with each other. So we got married kind of at the end of the night. And people had been there for a couple of hours. So we welcomed everyone, and we told them what we were doing, and we were at the door to greet everyone, which was amazing, because they just got to see us at the top of the night, which means we got to meet everyone who was coming along. And then we played like a little movie that we'd made, because we got married in a cinema. And then we had some readings and some speeches from our parents who were talking to us before we were married about like what it's like to be married. And then we ate, and then we cleared the plates, and then we went up on stage and then got married. So it had been like a couple of hours by that point. But by then, everyone was ready for us to get married. Like, no one was rushing. And some people were late, and they were like, oh, my God, I haven't missed the vows. I was like, no, you've got like an hour to go.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
It's such an artificial construct now that I think about it, and just one that you've gone along with because that's the way you've always seen it.
It's so funny, I think, how we as humans just copy each other because we don't know what to do. And we just sort of copy what's been modeled to us. And so I've got a joke in my stand-up about how like 90% of groomsmen's speeches always sound the same in this country. And they're always like, yeah, I just want to say to the bridesmaids, you look absolutely stunning tonight. And I don't know why they say that, but they've heard it at a wedding previous. And so they're like, well, I better tell the bridesmaids they look stunning for no reason. It's so strange. And so I love the way, and like even just that's why I struggled writing the vows, because I've just heard so many vows and they all sound the same to me that I found myself writing them how I've heard them rather than what I really wanted to say. You know, like, you are my ride or die, my rock,
my best friend. You make me laugh, but you also make me, just those cliches, and you try to avoid that because you want to be really saying something that you mean, and it's quite, but it's really hard because we've been to so many weddings.
I love in the book the observations of the day after the wedding, and this is more from a sort of MC perspective, but it's like people will look for an opening just to have a little bit of a bitch. Like,
have a little.
Lucky it was a beautiful day because it didn't look like they had any wet weather plans there.
People love to trash a wedding, and it's so ungrateful because you have been fed. You have had the night of your the couple have catered everything for you, you haven't had to worry about a single thing. Transport, it's all been taken care of. And then the following morning, you just want to go funny that, I just thought they had us outside for a while and there was sort of no shade in the sun. But no, beautiful ceremony, and just really want to get into it and dissect it because, we're all experts on weddings, I guess.
Yeah. I just thought it was interesting that they went with a carrot cake.
Yeah. No, and I'm not complaining. It was
delicious, but maybe it's more a birthday thing, really, than
it's sort of polarizing. I think you can sort of force carrot cake on people.
Shay might have your MC. What are your MC stats versus wedding invites, Shay?
Yeah, I saw it's 7 weddings you've been to, excluding your own, and 5 MC. Is that right?
Yeah, that might be right. Yeah.
So I've best manned 2, and I did include "Don't the Bridesmaids Look Fantastic Tonight?" Which when I read, that was the one chapter that I read out of this. I was like, oh shit, he's coming after me, and he's dead right. He's so right. And 5 MC plus 1 coming for my niece next year. So
wow. It's your skill set though, isn't it? And it is your. And I will say this, and I hope that they're not listening, but it is a really easy job.
Yeah.
But you get so much credit, and MCs are the way they're it's honestly, it would be an honor. And I'm happy to sacrifice my night. And literally all you're doing is being the toilets are over there. Yeah. Please welcome Uncle John to the mic. That is literally all you're doing. And maybe one joke.
You haven't seen any of mine then.
Oh, have you got I imagine you've just got them on their knees laughing.
Yeah, there's a couple.
Just begging, going, stop, please, for the love of God, shut up.
You're so good. Nah, seriously, I was really stressed about it.
So then how harshly are you critiquing the MC?
Yeah.
How did you choose?
We didn't have an MC.
Oh, no MC.
No, we hosted the night. I just don't understand this performance that the couple always give where it's they hadn't planned the night. Where they sort of walk in oh my, wow. They're so surprised by everything. Walking down the aisle oh, you're all here. As if they hadn't invited everyone, planned every single detail, organized the forks and the knives. They're across everything. So I was no, let's be present in it and let's host it. So we sort of took care of the night and we sort of hosted the whole thing. But of course, no one, when I was explaining it to my parents, you could just imagine they're oh, I don't know, sounds
interesting.
Sounds interesting, yeah. But there will be time for speeches. They're just so uncomfortable, the idea of it being different.
Yeah. So the way we normally start things at Between Two Beers is we tell the audience how we know the guests. So Shay, how do you know Chris?
Celebrity Treasure Island. I am reality TV super fan, and I was with you almost every step of that journey. And it was amazing, and I'm really looking forward to unpacking it a little bit later on.
I love that.
I've got some bits and pieces, but I've fell in love. And the other one, which always still makes me laugh, and I've sent it to a few people, is the friend who's come back from Berlin.
Oh yeah, that one did really well, that video.
It was amazing.
We've clearly all got that annoying
tiny
arsehole
shot
in our
of coffee.
life.
The shot of coffee just cracks me up every time. So I've shared that a number of times, and I go back to it all the time. So yeah, your content's amazing, but those two in particular, very, very awesome. And I know Stevie had a good time researching the podcast and getting over your catalogue of.
Don't speak on my behalf.
Sorry, mate, I've done it again. I always speak on his behalf.
Speak on my behalf.
Yeah, sorry, mate.
Yeah, look, you popped up on my radar, I think, through lockdown, like a lot of people. The Instagram clips are really relatable. And then I've sort of kept an eye on you ever since. A lot of the times when we do the research on these episodes, it can be a little bit of a chore. This one I found really enjoyable. The book I enjoyed, as I said, but also last night I just had a Chris Parker night. I watched the documentary where you went back to your high school in Christchurch. I spent, I went through about 100 different TikToks, and there's some funny stuff on there. Eh? Some of it should be locked in the lockdown chamber, but some of it has aged really well. So I'm looking forward to sort of getting into all that. But I wanted to paint a bit of a picture, and I want to sort of start heading towards Hudson and Hall chat. But I want to step back and start because you got that gig when you're about 24, right?
Yeah.
So before that, what was Chris Parker like? And then I'm going to build into how it sort of changed you.
Okay, well, my background is that I started in theatre, and I did it 3 years at Toi Whakaari, the New Zealand Drama School, and did like professional acting training. And I was very passionate, feverishly intense about theatre and being a serious actor and being taken seriously. And you graduate drama school and you don't land work immediately, obviously, but you sort of are thinking you might. And it's a very scary time leaving any tertiary institution, because it's such a vulnerable chapter of your life. Like you're floating. You don't really know where you're going. And
real world stuff.
And you think you know everything at uni, and then you're suddenly like, I know nothing about this world, and you don't know how you're going to pay your rent. So I'm sort of floating around Auckland and Wellington, Christchurch, doing weird shows and just popping things up here and there and being part of like odd productions. And I decided like I need to commit to Auckland. I just was floating around too much. I was like, I need to sort of like put my feet down here, tell people I live in Auckland, because I feel like once people know where you are, they know where to call you from, and that you get more work because of that. So I'm in Auckland, and then a friend of mine sets up an improv night at the Basement Theatre called Snort Comedy, and it's Friday nights. It's $5 at 10 p.m. and it's like a whole bunch of comics who don't really know each other. We're all sort of in a weird chapter of our lives. You Live has just finished at TVNZ, so a whole bunch of them have joined Snort because they're looking for a comedic outlet. And we do this improv show, and it goes so well. Like it's just it's so easy, so fun. The buzz is electric. But what's more important is a group of comics who are really beginning to vibe off each other. So we promised the Basement we would do 4 shows over September. And then they were like, oh, let's just do October as well. And so it's every Friday night. And then, let's go to the end of the year. And so next year we'll be heading into our 10th year of Snort Improv.
Are you still doing it now?
I'm doing it tonight.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
After this?
I know. And like no one gets paid for it. Like the money that we get from the ticket sales will go to like taking us to Edinburgh Fringe or Melbourne International Comedy Festival, and like the odd party here and there. And it's just like comedians who want to work with each other on stage and do a show. So that's sort of always been the kind of co-pupper of the whole thing. And then I'm becoming a comedian before I know it. Like I've sort of weirdly transitioned from a serious actor to a comedian. And I had a background in improv because I did it at high school, and it was like my chance to do theatre at high school was doing theatre sports. So I come in quite hot, and if I'm being honest, thought I was pretty good, and I think other people thought I was quite funny. And so I'm sort of starting to make like a name, like a local name for myself around the Basement, and people are going to the show because they want to see us perform. And this was people like Rose Matafeo and Alice Snedden, Joseph Moore, Laurie Daniel, Nick Sampson, like all these people that Brindley Stent, Tom Sainsbury, we see them around on 7 Days. Have you been paying attention? But we've been doing improv for ages.
What a combo.
Yeah.
What a golden generation of New Zealand comedians.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone you mentioned have gone on to be big names.
Oh, yeah.
The biggest names.
Because we grew off each other and we were coming through together, and there's this like love for what we were doing and love for each other that meant that we were just accelerating in terms of our skills. And like you can see it, we all started like winning the comedy awards, because we were all on this crazy journey together and bouncing off each other and getting sharper and funnier together.
Is that by accident or by design that group of people have come together? Is someone overseeing that going, you can come in and you can come in and you can come in? Or is it literally
Not
just,
you.
Yeah,
No.
you're okay.
It was just a Friday night, like 10 years ago, like who wants to do the show?
Wow.
And that's the people that turned up.
Right.
And then we just got, we thought we were amazing, but probably if you look back at that show, it would have been utter trash, but we got so much better at it. But then people kind of know, and I start hosting things. Like I hosted the theatre awards, just like weird gigs, but that's when like theatre people started seeing me, and I'm finding my power as a comedian, and I'm feeling invincible because I think I'm funny. And little I know, like Kip Chapman and Todd Emerson and Sophie Roberts, who run Silo Theatre, were planning this Hudson and Halls show, and they hadn't told me about it, but they take the whole team down to Snort on a Friday night to watch me do my thing, and they're like, I reckon that guy could play.
Did you know they were in the audience?
No, that guy could play David Halls, the like 60-year-old gay alcoholic.
Now, did you know anything about Hudson and Halls
Nothing.
prior to that?
Nothing. So then they're like, yeah, shit, he could do it. And so then I get invited over to their house, and we watch an episode of Hudson and Halls, and they're developing the script, and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, this is kind of funny. And I'm like, but it's Silo, so Silo Theatre, and they're theatre company that are just so cool at the time, and everyone wants to work with them. And I just had written that off as like, I'll never work for that theatre company because I'm not like a serious actor. They'll do serious plays where I'm like a funny guy.
But your intention was to be a serious actor.
I know, but I just kind of cottoned on quite early. Like, I'm self-aware enough to be like, okay, no one's kind of casting me in those roles. I'm not sort of getting offered Hamlet weekly, so what's going on here? And so, yeah, so I didn't think much more on it. I was like, oh yeah, it's like, this career is filled with people offering you exciting opportunities and them not flourishing to anything. It happens all the time. We should do this thing. This could be really great. And then it starts building, and then like funding doesn't happen, and then you get disappointed. So I've learned to not get excited for things. And so I was like, oh yeah, that'll be what it will be. And then before you know it, it's like this huge theatre production that tours internationally. And I really feel like I sort of made my mark with it in a weird way, because usually people make their mark with TV or movies, but it was with theatre.
Yeah, I want to pause here and paint the picture of Hudson and Halls, because I didn't know who they were until I did this research. I've heard the show was amazing. I know a few people that have been to it, but I didn't even realize like the sadness in the story. And if you're able to just tell us like what the story is.
They're an amazing part of our history here, and are entirely forgotten in some ways. They were a couple, but had kept it quiet. This is before homosexual law reform, so it was illegal to be gay in this country. And David Halls, Peter Hudson were they're framed as sort of friends who lived together and ran a shoe shop and a gelato emporium. Incredibly camp. Consider them like New Zealand's Liberace, just outrageous. Loved to spend money, would host these dinner parties. Kind of, you just sort of think of them as socialites now. And then they just could charm their way into any room. So they charmed their way into TVNZ and were like, we'll host a cooking segment on a weird TV show. And it was like a 15-minute segment, and within a year they had their own TV show, and then probably a year after that they were the #1 rating TV show in the country, and Feltex's Entertainers of the Year award, and they were the most famous men we had, and they cooked these terrible recipes, like the height of 70s cuisine.
Wow.
Like crepes and just cream and like just awful, like gelatin and just so, and like everything was steamed. It was just awful, but like of the time. And so they'd do a cooking show, and they would squabble with each other and basically get more and more drunk as their show went along, because they would always have like a bottle of brandy under the table. And there's staff at TVNZ now to this day who worked on that show back in the 80s who were like, it would get so crazy that the producer would walk up and go, hand it over. And then they'd just pull a bottle of brandy out from under the table that they were cooking from. It would be like half drunken. So people would watch mainly, some for the recipes, but mainly for the chemistry, and they would kind of laugh at these guys. But it was never really spoken of about their sexuality. And they were canned in 86, which just so happens to be the year that law reform passed. And they moved over to the UK, and the Listener did this article about them that said that they were in the closet with the doors wide open. And that was sort of New Zealand's attitude towards them. Like, we were comfortable with them, we embraced them, we accepted them, but we did not talk about them. And I think, and what like the term of their relationship was, they were not partners or lovers, they were just like Hudson and Halls. And it was just the easiest way to sort of sweep it under the rug, which I think is a real Kiwi ideology, right? Like, we just don't really want to get to the guts of it. We'll talk around the issue. And then they moved to the UK and had a bit of success on the BBC. And then Peter got really, really crook, and he passed away of cancer. And then David Halls, who I played, he took his own life a year later out of heartbreak. And they know so because it was in the diary, these diary entries. It's like, it's just devastating. So a really tragic end, but a true love story in that sense. And so that the show that we did took the audience back in time to the height of their career in 1998, just before they got cancelled. And
so Halls was found with a picture.
Holding the picture of Peter Hudson in his
when he
hands.
died.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a real sad element to it, but people are going in expecting a comedy, and they're getting this whole sort of transformative.
Yeah. So we didn't want to delve too deep in because we wanted to sort of, I don't know, remind people of these guys' legacy and why they were so great, rather than sort of dredging out the trauma of the end of their relationship. So you were taken back in time to 1986. We decked out the kitchen, the set, which was a working kitchen with all 80s appliances, and we cooked like 8 recipes on stage, and they would all go terribly. But they were like working elements, like, you know, the kettle would go, and like you could smell the onions and the celery and the carrots like going throughout the theatre, and so basically you were watching one episode get recorded, and then you'd get the ad breaks as well. So when we cut to ad break, it was like a live episode.
So you would stay in
the
character.
Audience would, yeah, and the audience would see what would happen between the ad breaks, and that's where all the drama would come out. And it ended with, the show ends with them learning that their show is going to be cancelled, and my character storms off into the bar and gets absolutely plastered with the audience. So it's like immersive for the audience. They're part of the experience. I'm drinking with them in the bar every night, and I get blind drunk. Not really, because I'd be in hospital because we did the show like 250 times. But and then come in for the second half and try and do the show, but he's just so drunk, like he cannot keep his eyes open, and the audience are just screaming with laughter. Like I've never heard laughter like that. It's just amazing.
So it was quite a transformative piece for you. Like you're playing a closeted gay guy who's out in the open. Where were you on your journey of coming out, and how did playing that character affect
Well,
your life?
I was out of the closet by then. I sort of came out at sort of end of drama school, but and I sort of got catapulted into the sort of gay media scene because it is pretty limited here. And like even before I'd come out to my parents, I was like on the cover of Express magazine here as like a gay wonder kid, and I was like, fuck.
Is that with the white underpants that you wore with Hayley Sproull?
No, it wasn't
was
that
same photo
It wasn't
shoot?
that same photo shoot, but similar time. And it was like,
you were in good nick then.
thank you.
Not that you're not now, but
No, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I need to tell my parents. Like, I need to tell my parents because they're going to see this magazine, and like I can't come out that way being like, I'm gay, but also a success. So I had to sort of like tell them first. And so no, Hudson and Halls is an interesting one though, because those guys were so unapologetically camp. Even though they were in the closet, they weren't hiding who they were. They were just hiding their like sexuality. But they weren't diminishing themselves. They were so camp and outrageous. And I think I just learned so much and was inspired by them. I should be clear as well, like anyone in history, like you sort of heroicize them in a way. Like anyone, they have their flaws, you know, like, and there was at the time, you know, there was the huge campaign for gay liberation, and they were not a part of it. And it is important to point that out because I think, well, my understanding from playing the guys is that if they got attached, they would have lost their careers, and they just weren't willing to sacrifice that because they had a lifestyle that they were not ready to give up, you know, and pan out with their Bentley, that, despite none of them having their license. So, but there was I was inspired by them to not hold back anymore and to realize that New Zealand has an affinity with campness, and we think that we wouldn't because we're this kind of rugby nation, but like one of the highest rating shows we have on this country is Graham Norton. We love Graham Norton. And I was like, there's nothing to be afraid of here. My campness is my power. Why am I diminishing this or trying to wedge myself into like this sort of masculine box when I just want to like run around and wear whatever I want to wear and let my just gesticulate and, you know, be as camp as I want to be. And I think people will embrace me if I just allow myself to be like that because they embraced them in the 70s.
So prior to that, were you almost trying to suppress some of that?
I think we all are, right, in a way. Because it's so I think sometimes my campness is so separate to my sexual identity.
Right.
Like I don't really link them together because I know camp people who are straight and still struggle with the idea of blending in with masculinity, like, and or I know women who are like, oh gosh, like people call me a show off or whatever, and I know I should be like humble and not too try hard. Like, I think that's like my campness is part of my personality, whereas I think my sexuality is kind of different. Like there was a shame linked to being with another man, and I had to work through that. But separate to that, there's also Chris Parker, who's just like outrageously camp, who sort of thought, I don't know, people weren't going to embrace me, or I wasn't going to get work if people saw that I was feminine.
I love the thought, because you did the show 6 nights a week, basically, right, for months and months on end. So you're turning into this character.
Absolutely.
But I love the thought of who the audience was, because you're performing for predominantly a gay audience, or you're happy if it's filled with
housewives.
Yeah, and I think was it in your book or an interview you read? It was like the audience would sometimes be like a 40-year-old gay man and his mum, and then her mum, and they all had their parts on this journey. And
yeah, it was beautiful. So many gay men would take their mothers along. Their mums would be in their sort of 80s, 80s and 90s, like getting on. And clearly the son had come out to his mum, but like the story you'd always hear was like, oh, mum and I used to watch this together, and we both had our inklings, but we never talked about it. But then they could come to the show and sort of laugh at the fact that they sort of were watching it together, and because it was a cooking show. But I think young men, specifically closeted gay men, were watching it because they were sort of seeing themselves out there represented in a weird kind of way. But there's a version of Hudson and Halls like all around the world. Like every country has like this camp cook in the 70s. It's so weird. It's like we all decided like we need
moment in time.
It was sort of one of those collective consciousness moments where like we all need a gay cook wherever we are.
So you break out through the show, you become a name or presence, people are aware of you. Link us up to how that led to become Jono and Ben head writer.
Well, that's actually happening at the same time, because it's all because of Snort again. So weirdly, I was taking time off my TV writing job, the thing that was like putting me on TV like at least once a week, to go do this like a tour of Hudson and Halls and Kitty Kitty or something. But that's because I've always preferred being out on stage more than being on camera. Even though I've learned to really love filming and making TV, the energy I get from being out in front of a live crowd is just always my preference. But it was sort of happening at the same time. So, and this was all around the same time as I was meeting Michael as well. It was 2015 was a big year for me.
Hell of a year.
Hell of a year. So, in fact, my third date with Michael, I was like, we call our admin date, because I was like, I've got a job interview, but let's like, if we met up beforehand, and then I went in for the job interview and he waited around.
Oh, wow.
I know.
That's a ballsy move.
Oh, well, we're married, so it paid off.
On both parts.
Yeah. And then, exactly. It could have gone terribly. And then I came out and I was like, yeah, I've got a job, I think. And then, it was sort of, and then, so that was kind of as we were meeting. But our first date, I was like so broke. So that sort of things were starting to change. And so I was already in the door at Jono and Ben, but very casually, just always emailing the boss, being like, can I have another week's work? And it was the same time that Funny Girls was happening. So there was a bit more work coming around. And then Hudson and Halls kicked off at the same time, so it was a bit busy.
I love the idea of you writing gags for that platform.
Yeah.
And the audience that they potentially have, and them not knowing, like, homosexual middle-class white guys writing all these gags that we're cracking up at.
I have such a respect for like mainstream media in a way, because if we want to have the conversation, like I've been having the conversation about masculinity or whatever for yonks, but only in my little stupid corners where people who already agree, But to get into Jono and Ben and be able to be writing their scripts and have the conversation, I don't think we should do that, and those guys were already sort of cottoned onto it anyway, and they were like, they're really smart dudes, they're very compassionate and empathetic. So even though they're kind of doing pranks, they're not trying to like hurt anyone's feelings. But it was powerful to kind of be in there when moments were happening, especially because it was at a big moment where we were talking about just acceptance and representation, and to sort of be in there while that was happening was really good. And like there were moments where like there's this big story about Bert and Ernie being gay, and it was just like because it was like a weekly TV show, we had to talk about it, and they had 2 gay writers on the show, so it was like we could just fly with it. In fact, John and Ben were like, "Oh, you guys take it." So Eli and I were on camera talking about it and doing a whole bunch of jokes about it. So it just felt kind of powerful at that time.
But Jono and Ben was one of the biggest shows on TV. So to go from a guy who was casual to the head writer, like you must have been dominating those
high turnover
scripts.
People are just quitting. People can't handle the pressure.
It's like, Jesus, that skit from that Parker wrote, that's nailed it again and again. Like, is that how it happens? Is it like you're dominating those sessions enough that they think that you give them more power?
It's just a great it was such a great talent builder machine. So like you'd come in not knowing anything and learn really quickly the skills about writing sketch and comedy and jokes. And then that person who has been doing that job for a while was ready to leave and move on to something else, and so they might quit, and someone else would step up into that role. So it was just because the show ran for like 7 years or whatever, we were able to move people through, and they got to develop over time. So it felt kind of natural. I mean, I was co-head writer with Eli Mathewson, so there was 2 gay writers on that show, which was quite funny. And it's because Alice Sneddon above us was going to move on to something else and develop a sitcom. So it was just so great to have that infrastructure to allow people to learn and grow, and we don't really have it anymore in a weird way. We've got gag writing, spec writing for 7 days, and have you been paying attention? But like to write a script or a sketch is like quite different, because you've got to be able to write a world, or like, you know, and give it to a production team and let that world come true off the script. So that those skills I'm like taking into my jobs now.
Yeah, I know you've got a lot of cool stuff going on at the moment, but you must look back at that period thinking, me and my mates, all of you guys who are so talented and so funny, we go into work and we try to think of funny ideas that they turn into high production skits on the biggest show on TV.
And we're shifting opinions at the same time about kind of lifestyle choices.
I know,
and the way things
it was
are.
the dream, but then it's so funny to be there at that time and think like, it's so funny you look back and you're like, what were you worrying about? But when you're in it, you're never truly totally happy. I mean, we were loving it. It was a great job. But there's always pressures of work, isn't there? Like, you're like, oh God, yeah. But then you look back and you're like, if only you were so grateful, because it was genuinely the most chill, fun job you could have. But a weekly show turnaround was pretty full on.
Yeah.
One of the benefits that we have about this podcast is that we've had the luxury of having Jono and Ben on, and having previous guests on, they're able to feed us some interesting lines, which may end up with interesting stories. And one of the ones that we've got is a story from Ben Boyce around you fish sitting.
Fish sitting. Oh,
an goldfish story?
Oh my God, yes. Jono loves the story.
Oh, is it a Jono story?
But Ben knows it as well. Oh man. I got a goldfish. It wasn't sitting, but I got given a goldfish tank for my birthday, which is an insane gift to give someone, like, because they have to get a fish. And you can't
responsibility,
just
sense of
impose,
responsibility.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's like giving someone a dog leash. It's just crazy, or a nappy. Like, what are you thinking? So I was like, oh God, I should probably get a fish. So I got a goldfish, and I was looking at this terrible flat, and it's going all right. But I learned after many phone calls with animates that we imported goldfish 30 years ago from like Germany, and we've been inbreeding them ever since. So they've got terrible immune systems. And so that's why they're like, don't tap on the glass, because they're all inbred and they can't deal with the shock of it. And so fish have a thing in them. I know too much about fish because of this incident. Fish have this thing in them called a swim bladder. And the swim bladder is what keeps the fish buoyant. So, because, you know, like if you put a leaf in the water, like it's going to float around, you know? But if you put the fish needs to stay upright, because, but you're like, how does it do that? Because it's not like keeping itself balanced like we're in the water, because its swim bladder keeps it buoyant. However, if it gets a fright, its swim bladder will freak out, and the fish won't be able to stay buoyant in the water. It just will float around like a plastic bag in like a pool. Like it's shocking to see. Like the fish is just like, it's like that DVD menu thing where the DVD like bounces off the sides of the TV.
That's seen in the American Office.
Yeah, but it's a fish, and you're like, oh my God. So I call animates being like, my fish is clearly lost its mind, and it's not doing the thing it should. It's not the right way up. And what should I do? And she tells me about the swim bladder, and she tells me about Germany. So that's where I learned it all. And I was like, I'm never going to forget that. I was like, well, how do I fix it? And she goes, you need to feed the fish a little bit of a frozen pea. It sounds like a fairy tale. I was like, what? She's like, get a bag of frozen peas, shell a pea, cut it down, and feed the fish.
Why does it need to be frozen?
Why does it need to be a pea? Why does it need to be shells? Why did we import them 30 years ago from Germany? There's so many questions. And so, how do you feed a goldfish that is floating around in water? I had no idea. So I get like a bobby pin, and I pick up like chopsticks. I pick up this tiny bit of pea, and I decant the fish into like a bowl so it's got less like floating room, and I'm just like force feeding this fish this pea, and like the fish isn't like it's a tiny little goldfish, you know, it's the size of my thumb, the mouth is small, and I'm thinking I'm only making this worse. Like this fish wants to go, and now I'm kind of getting stressed out by it, and I feel like I'm putting the fish through pain. So I call Animates again, and I'm like, how do I humanely sort of euthanize this fish, because it has got a lot of pee shoved down it like a beanbag. Like it needs some release from this world. It doesn't want to be here. And she's like, listen, us at Animates, we cannot support the sort of euthanization of animals. And I was like, okay, fair. And then she's like, but I was like, thank you. The best way to do it, don't flush it down the toilet.
Yeah.
Everyone thinks that's the best option, but it stays alive and it has a hell of a go, you know, just like ding, ding, ding,
Turns
down
into
a
an
tube.
alligator or something like that, doesn't it?
God,
Down
yeah, yeah, whatever. Probably in New Zealand, like a possum, but I was like, oh my God. Okay, so then what? And she's like, the best thing you can do is put it, she says on the phone, in a black plastic bag and whack it over something really hard.
What?
Wow.
And I was like, are you serious? And she's like, but we wouldn't recommend that. And I was like, no, of course
I
we
don't feel
wouldn't.
like that's euthanization. That's
Murder. So I find a black plastic bag, because luckily I'm going to the wine shop a lot and I have one, and I put the fish in, and again, it's not like a week's worth of rubbish in there. It's like, it looks like one bottle cap in a plastic bag. It's just insane behavior. And my neighbour's outside having a ciggy, and I walk out, I'm like, morning to him, holding what looks like apparently a empty black plastic bag, and I've got tears in my eyes. I'm like, how are you? Trying to be cool. And he's like, all good, mate. And then I just sort of like whack this bag multiple times as I sort of zone out over the stairs, just being like, I hope I've killed it. Anyway, that's the story, and Jono loves it, because I guess you just don't expect that from me. But then I do look a little bit like David Bain, so maybe you do expect
I wondered,
it from
I've got that in my notes as well. Is that a career goal, maybe, to play David Bain in a later...
Well, funny you mentioned that, because there's they made that Black Hand series about him. And
I thought it was Black Hands as well.
yeah, well, the producer of it messaged me being like, I've always dreamed of you in the role, which was, I don't know if a compliment or
that's
but I auditioned, and then I got like a call back, and it was quite weird being in a room filled with sort of David Bain lookalikes. He's sort of like, and another guy walks out, and you're like, oh yeah, he kind of looks like him too, you know. And you're like, oh, what should I wear? Like, I don't want to. Do I wear like the jumper? I don't know. Is that too much? And didn't get the role.
Did you wear the jumper?
But I was close. Apparently, I was just too old. I did not wear the jumper.
Didn't go for the jumper.
No, I went for
Did you regret it
ruddy
afterwards?
rain jacket.
Yeah.
But they were impressed with my acting, so maybe I could be a serious actor to this day. But David's an interesting guy because for many reasons, but his whole like chapter of his life, which would be a great book. Imagine if he just one day wrote it like all the truth out.
Imagine
He would sell a lot of books,
it'd be a
and he
bestseller.
wouldn't go back to jail. So I mean,
don't take this the wrong way. He'd be higher than 7.
Oh yeah. Oh, you know. No.
David, if you're listeling.
It's just an idea. If you need a publisher, I'll publish it.
Wow. Yeah.
But anyway, I'm too old. I was too old apparently. But yeah, he was an operatic guy. Like he was into an odd guy, and I was like, yeah, so he would have a bit of spark to him. Not now, obviously.
Podcast guest.
Yeah, you could do all your research on him.
So,
It was a pleasure going through all your previous work.
Allegedly.
Alleged previous work.
I could see you as a David Bain.
But before we leave animals, you fucking hate birds,
Yeah.
quote unquote. Hayley Sproull.
Yeah, they're in the book. I can't stand them. Hayley Sproull's afraid of moths, so you'll have to, when you have her on, you can ask her about that. Just for some more dirt. But I'm scared of. I'm a tall guy.
You are a tall guy.
And everyone says, "Oh my God, you're so tall." I must give off short energy. I didn't realize. Online, everyone's like, "What a short guy," but then they see me and they're shocked. And because I'm tall, birds fly, at a height that is normal for them, and people wouldn't notice. But for me, I'm like, that was close. Like every day, like a bird almost flies into my head, and I got obsessed with the idea of their beaks flying in to me. And because I saw this video on YouTube of a bird like that had flown into a glass window and got its beak caught in the window, and I was like, there we go, they could fly into your leg and get stuck. That's going to happen. And so I just sort of had that thought irrationally in my mind, and then I hate the idea of it freaking out because its beak's caught in my leg and I'd have to hold it, and I just don't like the idea of feathers, touching feathers, and It's completely irrational, and I know it is. But
Getting another black rubbish bag, stuff.
I always have one on me,
there,
mate. I always have one on me. Just you never know when you're going to come across a pigeon. But where do they go to die? Pigeons, because there's so many of them. But you tell me, have you ever seen a dead pigeon on the road?
No, it's a very
very
good point.
Where?
It's like magpies as well, I guess.
They must go out to sea.
Magpies go back to their gang lab. You know, they're just like evil birds. But pigeons, I'm like, they're dime a dozen in Wellington, just hundreds of them. But you'd never see one just like in a gutter, dead from old age. No. They must fly out to sea.
Out to sea.
But even then, is it the same spot? Because there'd be a huge pile of them.
Find a little island.
I don't reckon they would. Yeah, I don't know about flying out to sea. I don't know where that.
Because they don't seem seagulls. Sure, they love the water, but pigeons, they kind of like night and day fries, and they're just sort of they're urban cool. They're smoking.
I reckon they go to some sort of a woodland area and then just sort of
drop dead.
Yeah, sort of just.
Someone will know.
Yeah,
they just fall, don't they? They don't like dig themselves a hole and bury themselves. They just.
I don't think any animal does that, do they?
I know. I mean, we don't even do that as humans.
No, it's other people have to do it for you.
For us.
Yeah.
What else did Hayley give us? She said kind of a really weird combination of things. She said, we used to share a bed a lot.
Yep.
And
that's why I couldn't take Michael home on our second date, because Hayley was in my bed. Because we went to drama school together. We spent 3 years acting together, and then we made sketch comedy. We spent a lot of time together. And
were you guys just the king and queen of drama school? Imagine you and Hayley Sproull.
Or the queen and queen?
Oh, nice.
Queen and queen, yeah. No, we weren't. Well, because the priority was like who was going to be the next Robin Malcolm, who was going to be the next Cliff Curtis, because they went to those schools. So it's always like a priority on serious actors. And no one really respects a comedic actor, but it should be that way. But it's always like who's going to win Best Actor and Best Actress, but it's never anyone in a comedy role. It's always, they're just like, oh yeah, you can have a Nickelodeon or whatever. But so I think being funny, we were finding some power, but we weren't like respected. We were kind of like sellouts. But look at us now.
Yeah, respected now.
But your funny is not really joke telling funny, is it? It's more observational kind of performance comedy.
Yeah, yes. I'm not. Well, I am a stand-up. And I do tell jokes. It's just that I really like to disguise my jokes, and no one really knows that it's coming. I just maybe don't have the bravery to be like set up punchlines. So I'd rather wedge them inside stories, but I definitely craft them in a way. But they just don't sound like regular jokes.
Yeah, performance comedy.
Is it fair to say that, I mean, the stuff we've already talked about, you were kind of a big name already, but was lockdown when you really broke out?
It's so funny saying a big name like in this country, but this is like my own tall poppy and cutting myself down. But it really doesn't take a lot to climb it, Like it's a small pool, and I'm very aware of it as well. But yes, it's funny. You always think you're like, wow, it's not going to get better than this. Like this is the biggest audience. I'm in Hudson and Halls. I'm in Kitty. They're loving me, and then suddenly something else will happen, and you'll be surprised by that. And then, the first lockdown. It all was like, I'm that Instagram guy, and everyone's sort of talking about that Instagram guy, and I'm doing this like felting, like this craft of needle felting, and that's drawing a lot of attention, and people are still talking about me. But I, at the time, would have maybe like 16,000 followers, which isn't a measure of success, but was a measure of success. Yeah. And then the second lockdown, Delta. Oh boy, things really kicked off because Treasure Island was happening.
Yeah, it was simultaneous, right?
And I was also doing my own stuff to keep myself entertained on my Instagram. And so it just sort of collided in a way that was like a little overwhelming, but really exciting. And that was the thing that really, I felt like, put me on the map.
Did you taste a little bit of that in the first lockdown, and then everyone was kind of out a little bit again, and in the second lockdown you're like, right, here we go?
It's never like, yes, I'm going to make content now. I think it's more like a natural reaction I have to want to be creative. And I've always been like that. And I lost a lot of gigs. Like I wasn't performing and I wanted to work. And so I was like, and everyone had their own response. Some people was like, I just want to never put my pants on, and I just want to sit on my bed and just like see if I can eat this whole bag of chips in half an hour. And that's a valid response. And mine is to be like, freak out and like make content and like make videos and just sort of try and express how I'm feeling and share. And by sort of mid lockdown though, it was like, okay, this is what I'm doing. Like I'm going to commit to this and do this every day. And it's I can see how it's helping me. Like I'm growing this audience and people are enjoying it. So it's sort of a two-way thing that's happening beautifully, and it's organic, and I'm just going to like pursue this.
I'm keen to dig into the process a little bit.
Yeah, me too.
Like, because Tom Sainsbury is a mate of yours, and he's doing similar stuff, and he's sort of exploding as well. Not
Our
like
egos
Tristan.
are exploding.
Thank you. But when you're putting up so much stuff, are you like married to the analytics of it? Like, oh shit, this one did 500,000 views. This one did 500.
Berlin did
I need to do more like that. Like,
No, not at all. It is purely when I want to do it, what I want to do. That's it. Like, it's chaotic. I don't care enough.
And do you vet it though as well? Do you bounce it off anyone, or do you just go, fuck it, I'm just going to send this out and just see what happens?
Yeah, it's because
Awesome.
it's a release. It's just like me wanting to make something and putting it up, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, I don't care. Like, I still thought it was funny, or it was fun to make. It's always got to be if it's fun to make, I guess, is like the priority. And then if it's fun to make, then I think some people will enjoy it, and people enjoy different stuff. And I think that's the way it works. And I think if you pay too much attention to algorithms, like, you're making it for the wrong reasons. I like expressing myself, and I like creating stuff, and I like being creative, and I like pushing my limit of my creativity. And so that's what I enjoy about the process of making those things. I'm learning to edit and shoot, and I'm learning about angles, and they get better. Like, if you watch the earlier stuff, it's like you see how fast it improves because I'm figuring it out. And then what was amazing is I got to the back to school special, and I was like, this was my first time kind of creating my own broadcast hour, and I'm in the edit suite, and I'm like, oh shit, I know what I'm doing. Like, it suddenly was like dawned upon me, and we needed like a pickup, and I was like, we could do this pickup here, and we can't get back to Christchurch, but I think I could just record the audio on my phone, and we could use this shot here. We can't see the front of my face, and we'll just overlay the audio there, and it'll work. And I'm like, oh my God, me farting about on my phone. It's actually like I'm upskilling. I've gone to film school without me even realizing.
Crazy that. And how many people have had that same experience of just making TikToks or little reels, and they become little indie filmmakers?
But Tom and I've always been like, creative, and always been sort of online and making stuff and not really caring too much about it. Weirdly, I feel like we were right at the beginning of like web series. Like, we made a web series called, what's it called? Bachelor Pad. This is like 2014. You know, it was like so early. And we were making a web series. We're making like webisodes, and everyone would be like, "What?" And then they'd be like, "Oh, you mean like?" And everyone would say, "High maintenance." It was like the reference, because there was like no other no one was making stuff to go online. And this was before there was like on demand and 3Now and Netflix and like streaming. It was all beginning to happen, and so not like we're pioneers, but it was just like we've always sort of been interested in being online. It's not like a new thing for us. And then we made a web series called Stakeout, and we did 3 seasons of it.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, and like just chucked it on our like personal Facebook pages, like not even public profiles, just for like our 100 friends to see. And now we're sort of both doing that in a weird way to this day.
So you started at the start. You said you had 16,000 Instagram followers. How was
before
that?
the first lockdown, it was 6.
6,000.
No, 6 total.
6.
Just 6. Just mum, dad.
6 hardy souls.
That's got to be factoring in though. Yeah, the followers are flooding in the hundreds and the thousands.
You're definitely like, oh my gosh, like I've got 10,000 followers now. Oh my gosh.
Are you looking for blue ticks in those followers as well? we all do it. We all look for the verified ones.
I guess so, but it was weird because it was all happening during lockdown. So I'm glad in a way it wasn't like, I was out in the streets and my ego was being inflated. And it was like you're isolated.
Yeah,
like
true.
You're having this crazy online growth, but you're not like walking down the street being recognized because you're not allowed to be outside. So in fact, and you're covering up your face. So no one was like recognizing you in that sense, which was good. It just meant that I was like trying to have my own relationship with it rather than be sort of this hero, this king that was like running around town.
There's a real satisfaction with like picking out someone who's going to blow up before they blow up. I remember Tom Sainsbury when he had like 10,000 followers on Facebook, and he was doing those little Snapchat.
Oh, fuck! He used to send these to me
time.
all the time.
I was like, "Holy shit, man! This guy's gonna be huge. These are so good." Like, you just watch him; he's got to go and go.
It's so funny knowing Tom for as long as I've known him, because like, he's been around He is so old. He's had great work done. He has been doing this for ages, and like I feel like so many, like he's worked with everyone. You know, like back in the day, like he was doing shows at the Basement, like Antonia Preble, and writing them like weird shows to be in, and then everyone, but they were all these kind of actors that New Zealand didn't know where to kind of place him yet, you know, and he just sort of had to find his way in, and it eventually sort of organically happened for him in this way that is like so satisfying to see, because I'm like, there's someone who didn't have overnight success. Like there's someone who's like just kept going and sticking at it and honing their thing and figuring it out, and it's really earned and deserved what they've got, and I feel like is now using that platform in a really smart way. Yeah, he's very inspiring to me.
Yeah, me too. He would be a future guest, I think, Shay. But simultaneously to this, Treasure Island is going on.
Yeah, I knew that was coming. I've really started to lean in.
As soon as we confirmed you as a guest, Shay was
like
Treasure Island. Oh my God, we're going to talk so much about Treasure Island.
Look, this
is your time, bro.
I won't go all into the weeds. Huh?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. The Kakuya.
But I do want to just touch on that the final and where that perseverance came from, and how much of that was aligned to the charity that you were playing for. Was that in the back of your mind, which is Rainbow Youth, Steve? I know you didn't watch the show, but every celebrity has a charity that they play for, and yours was Rainbow Youth.
Yeah.
And you got down to the final 3, and you were miles behind, but you didn't quit or give up. So where did that perseverance come from?
Well, I basically decided that I had lost from the night before. And everyone was like, no, you've still got a shot. And I was like, no, I don't. Like, Edna is so fierce and like so fit, and Lance is like an absolute, like weapon out there. And I was like, okay, Chris, like just think about this, like the night before. And I'm not giving up. Like I think I'm always like, you have to respect these platforms. You have to respect this opportunity. Don't waste it. And I think people who sort of act too cool, it's like that is one of my least favorite like qualities in someone who acts like above something. And I was like, no. So like stick at it and like don't give up ever. But you've lost. And so how are you going to represent yourself and like your charity in this final, knowing that you're going to become like last place, like dirt last? And I was like, okay, great. So my priority, like going into the show, I was very clear about what I wanted to get out of it, which was like get as much representation and money for Rainbow Youth as possible, and then like make good TV, and then just like be the funniest person on the show. It was like my priority, because I was like, I'm a comic and I want to use this as well for me. So into the final, I was like, okay, like just be as funny as you can be, like make good TV, don't give up. And like that could be what you could give this charity, because you can't give them $100,000, is that you can give them like a really good role model of like what to do in the face of adversity, and like when it's just not playing your way, how can you be in yourself in a way that shows that next time you've got it. And so I was like, oh, that's what I'll do. And I was like, okay, just take all this energy out of you that you've lost and just pour this all into Rainbow Youth. So I wrote on my hand, like, do this for Rainbow Youth, just as a reminder to put your ego aside and think about something beyond you, something that will push you to keep going when you've had enough, because it's hot and you're tired and you're hungry and you can't be fucked. So that was written on my hand. And like, it seems, when you say it, it just sounds false, doesn't it? Like it's a TV show. It's just burdened with ego, and there's so much about like yourself on there. And of course, that's a part of it. If you ignore it, it's fake. We've all got egos, but you would definitely want to give up, because it was just exhausting. Like there was just no hope. And so just to have that reminder of Rainbow Youth, and the fact that they're a charity that work across so many levels, like, they're advocating for queer youth in government or in high schools, but then they've just got drop-in centres, physical spaces where young queer kids can go into, and it's like, that's the activism I just love, when it's like, it's the thing, so it's like, it's a dress that a young trans woman can put on for the first time and feel and figure it out in a safe space, or like play with makeup for the first time, or just have a friend or community to talk to. It's like the physical space. It's like such simple activism, but it's like the most important activism, because it's like really making the effect in that person's life. And I was like, oh my God, like they could really do with that money. So that was also in the back of my mind. And then, I was honestly, like, it looks like when you watch the show, 12 hours behind. I was 11 minutes 22 behind Edna. And I know this because it's this big, long challenge that goes over a whole day, and it's broken up into 3 sections, and they stopwatch you and pause you between each section just so that the cameras can repo and make sure that they're getting the coverage, because otherwise we're just doing this for no one. It's like you have to remember that it's a TV show. And then, so we're at the final pit stop, and we're going over the sand dune into this weird escape room to sort of solve the last clue and then find the treasure. So the production person's there with the stopwatch, and they're like, Lance, go, and he runs over, and then Edna has to wait like 3 minutes, whatever. And so and Edna's like, come on. And then it's like, Edna, you can go. So she runs over, and then the production woman's like, okay, and now 11 minutes 22. And I just had to stand there like for 11 minutes 22. And all I could think is like, Lance is digging up the treasure, and I'm just like standing here, not on camera, like, oh my God.
And waiting 11 minutes is a long time to wait.
When you are counting every second, it is an eternity. I'm just standing there like, oh my God. And then I was like, they're going to have to cut me back and do pickups of me like at the previous challenge solving the word scramble while Lance is digging up the treasure, because I'm not going to make it in time. And I was like, this is humiliating. And I'm just standing there but being like, remember, you're a role model for Rainbow Youth. Put your ego aside. And then it's like, okay, you've got 10 seconds, Chris. And I was like, oh my God, he hasn't dug it up yet. And then suddenly it was like, okay, fuck, none of that matters. Like, you're now in 3rd place, and and I just ran in and I caught up. And then as soon as I was in the room digging with him, I was like, how today has gone doesn't matter. Because all that has mattered is that I have made it here, and now we're neck and neck. And then when that's like, it's just about like, working through that logic in your brain, because it's so easy to carry like, failures along with you, but like all they're doing is weighing you down. So as soon as you let yourself go of those failures and you're like, oh, they don't matter, then suddenly you're starting fresh again. And I had like all this energy, and then we just dug, and they cut it down, but we were digging for like 20 minutes. Like we renovated the place. Like, and I had run in, and like Lance and Edna had dug up like everything. And I was like, shit, like they have been in here for 11 minutes 22. They know what's here more than what I know is here. So I was sort of digging where they were digging. And then I was like, oh my God, wait a minute. This, like, and everyone was just spayed, just like, because we were told that it was only, like a foot or whatever, like under the soil. So it wasn't too deep. So it's just like wherever you could get your spade in, get it in, and then you might be able to hit it. And then I was like, no, wait a minute. This is like kikuyu. This is like a noxious weed. It's a grass that was like imported in the 60s to coastal areas because it doesn't die.
I love that you know this.
It grows like ropes into the soil. And I know this because it grows in my backyard. And a year ago to that day probably, I was trying to dig it up, and my friends were like, give up, because you will never get underneath that soil. And I was like, it can't be underneath here. So I just start pulling on the weeds and just trying to figure it out that way. And then I find this tree. And of course it's stuck under a tree, because like you can't get the root, like there's enough soil around there. And I was like, I knew as soon as like I got to that little spot that I was like, it's there, like it's 100% there. It was just crazy. It was crazy.
Can we also talk, you've mentioned him already, but your bromance with Lance?
Yeah.
Because that's an interesting one, and I think I've heard you reference like you've, and I might be paraphrasing you wrong here, but like navigating relationships with males has been a little bit of a struggle as you've gone through. And did that relationship kind of break that?
I mean, I've never met anyone like Lance in my life, but I reckon he's met people like me, and that's like the interesting thing about Lance. He's like, his world is so rich and diverse, and he's really like experienced, and he's been in the dance world for so long, and it's filled with like the most amazing people. And I guess one of them.
Well, you've got a dance background, haven't you, as well?
I do, yeah. Not like Lance, but so, yeah, it was like unusual. I just was like, but I kind of cottoned on to him kind of early. I was like, and kind of had like, just like, he's cool. I was like, oh my God, this guy's unreal. And it was this weird moment where we merged together, and we were just like so excited to be working with each other and be able to hang out with each other. And I think he just appreciated that I kind of had one foot out of the show a little bit. Like I was like invested, but also had the ability to kind of laugh at it and mock everyone, including myself. That meant that we just accelerated this friendship. And when you've kind of got nothing out there and you're feeling vulnerable, it's so easy to fast track that friendship. And that's the best thing about doing that show is, the cameras wrap at 7 and they go up to the crew room and then you go back to the Airbnb. No, you stay.
Please don't ruin it for me.
You stay where you are and you have to do the night there. And there's no cameras, there's no mics. You're not on. It's just you. And so,
because are you on more when the cameras are on?
yes. And I made a conscious decision to, because I'm there to make TV. And I was like, that was a goal for me the whole time, was like, we're here to make TV. Like, we are here for our charities. But the money has been made to make a TV show, so let's make TV. And like every morning I'd be like, we're making TV. And I make TV for a living. So I was like really excited to be like making TV. And I'd never worked in the idea of like reality TV before. So I was really inspired by the fact that there was just no bullshit. There's no waiting around. Like, it's just like you just get to go. You get to write, edit, and direct the whole thing like by just being and doing yourself. And so, yeah, Lance and I just connected really quick, and Edna, but she didn't trust us and we didn't trust her. But eventually we all got on board, and when we were that final 3, there was a real intense relationship, and there still is. Like Lance was away for work, but he was going to come to my wedding otherwise. Like, it's still there now. We just are able to connect deeply and talk and have serious chats, but then also laugh, and we're just so different.
Just the last thing on serious chats, it was Buck Shelford, and it was a moment in the show that I was like, fuck, I did not see that coming. And it was Buck Shelford, man of incredible mana, talked about how he has people within his own whānau from the rainbow community. And when I was watching it, I was like, fuck, that's the last thing I would expect to see. And I just thought that was an amazing bit of television. You referenced that you're making TV.
It's amazing, isn't it?
But for someone like that to, I don't know, acknowledge or see, or maybe that's not such a big deal.
Well, it didn't feel like it at the time, but of course that's the great thing when you're just getting to be yourself, and then the power of TV and editing, and then it becomes representation in this way that you just being creates a bit of magic, I think, and that's the power of Buck on that show. And I think that was just such genius casting. Like, that was such an eclectic mix, and we could see that when we arrived. It's like, fuck, we're all really different, and that's kind of interesting. And yeah, it was really cool getting to know Buck. And I think what people liked about Buck and I bonding on that, because I hear it a lot, is that, again, we're from really different worlds, and we both have our own preconceptions about each other's community, and you'd think that we'd already made these judgments, and it wasn't about Buck coming over to me, but it was actually about me and Buck meeting in the middle and sort of putting each other's ideas about who each other are and just meeting each other on the same level and connecting that way, and then we realize all the similarities that we have. And that's what it's been like a big learning for me, because I think when you're 21 and you're angry and you think the whole world should burn because everyone sucks and everyone's homophobic, you build walls up. And I think it's important to, when you want to connect with people, you have to do the work too. Like, you have to soften and engage with people so that you can meet equally. You're not asking them to come over on my side. It's like, I'll come over. Well, let's meet in the middle. Then everyone's uncomfortable.
Yeah. The sides is interesting. And I want to go back to the documentary and going back to your high school.
Oh, perfect segue.
Yeah.
You guys are journalists. This isn't a podcast. This is 2020.
Because it's great. And anyone listening to this, I recommend you go and watch it. It's on TVNZ on demand. And so Chris goes back and he does like a stand-up routine at his high school, but he also talks to the students and he talks to the principal. And there's some gags, some really funny bits, but there's also some real moments of emotion. And I know I've heard you talk about using tears as a weapon, and I want to talk about if that was by design. But there was one bit in particular when you're talking to the principal, and they mentioned that they do Pride Week now. It's something, a student initiative. And you spoke, and it kind of, you started welling up, and you sort of reflected on how important that would have been to you if that had been there when you were at school, because you were in the closet during your high school years. It was tough times. If there'd been that support network, it would have changed things. So yeah, how do you reflect on that whole doco?
Well, it's a bit like that about, like, I think if I'd made that series 2 years ago or 3 years ago, it would have been like, you school are so behind, you fucked me up, you burned the place to the ground. Like, it's so angry. And I think what I'm so grateful about with like age and experience is about like not coming in so hot. And it was about us like meeting in the middle kind of, and me trying to genuinely understand the relevance of all male education and why do we need it anymore? Because there's a lot of critique about it.
Because it's Christchurch boys,
Christchurch
right?
boys. It's
so we're both Hamilton boys, old boys as well. So we've been through that kind of.
Yeah, it's so like you go through it and you just take everything for granted. Like you're just like, oh yeah, that's just the culture of an all boys school. And it wasn't until I started doing comedy about it and sort of thinking about it more that I was like, why is that the case? Why does it need to be like that? Why do boys have to like grow a bit of hair on their chest and, you know, like sort of bit of argy-bargy, and that's just the culture and it just thickens your skin. Like, why does it have to?
I love how quickly you can shift into that that alter ego. It's amazing. It's a great boy. It's a great character.
Why do we have to grow our confidence through trauma that way? Like, why can't we develop and strengthen ourselves in other ways with more compassion? So that was sort of burning away, and I'd done this stand-up show, and about the end of the show sort of talked about Boys High and not a very favourable light, but it was born out of me going back to my school years ago and speaking at the all boys, the Leavers dinner, and I talked about my experience of telling the school that I had a boyfriend, and just like it was one of those really indulgent moments where like it was not really about the boys who I was there to speak for, but me just wanting to be like, I have a boyfriend, like in that school, where I just felt like it was silencing me in this way. I was never going to be able to be who I wanted to be. And so to be able to be like, I'm gay, but I didn't even have the confidence at that age to be like, I'm gay in that building. But I did say I had a boyfriend, so I did out myself. And like a teacher came up to me at the end of that speech and was like, no one in the history of the school has ever done something like that before. And he'd been there for years. He was like a history teacher that had, you know, been there for ages. And I was like, that's shocking to me because, you know, like surely probably someone has, but not enough. So I was like, okay, like this is a place where, again, talking about like kind of activism, just like really practical, simple things and not a big way, not online, just my physical presence inside of the school or working with the school can help shift something. And there's so many boys who are going through this institution every year. I could help like rattle that, you know, institution in a way and allow it to sort of grow in the way that it was kind of wanting to anyway, and built this really genuine, great relationship with the headmaster there. And we've been talking for years and years. And like, whenever he's got something he wants to like chew the fat with about like my world, then he'll just like flick me an email and we have a big yarn about it. And I'm not like coming from an expert position, but I just think he's wanting a pair of open ears and someone who's not going to judge him as he kind of works out what he should do. And I'm open and keen to listen and not throw him under the bus. And it's really organic and generous, and it's a really cool thing. And it was starting to heal a bit of that like wound for me in a way. And so I thought, shit, there's something in this idea of going back to that space. And so TVNZ gave me money to make a comedy special. And this is before Omicron. And they want it pretty quick. They want it on air pretty quick. And I was like, my idea was I was inspired by Adam Sandler's comedy special, which is a great special where he just one show, but he does it over like 35 centers. And so it just like you see the same routine, but then cut into like a tiny room of 60 to like an arena, and you see how like comics work. And I was like, well, what if I did my show one at home? So 3 shows. So one at home, one at Boys High, and one in like the biggest theater I can fill, as a way to like show like this is like these 3 big chapters of my life. And then Omicron hit, and I was like, okay, well, that is no longer possible. And TVNZ were like, you can either figure a way how to do this or like kind of give the money back. And I was like, oh my God. So we decided, okay, let's just go all in on the school. We'll do the whole special in the school. And we'll make it like half documentary, half comedy special. And we'll talk to the boys, we'll talk to the headmaster, and we'll like unpack this idea of an all boys school and why do we need them. And I'll also do my comedy in that space. And I think it's a kind of interesting watch, you know, like it's funny, but then a lot of people reflected back being like, shit, it really made me think about like my experience of school. And they're like, I'm not gay, but I did think it was kind of hard. And it's like, yeah, why is that? And then so hopefully it like that school is growing, like, and it's not my doing, you know, I've just been a part of it, but it is like evolving now to a place that's like, yeah, it's got Pride Week and it's really inspiring, because I just felt like even in 2017 or whatever, when I said that I had a boyfriend, it was still like not possible to say that in that building. So now that they've got like visible pride flags on the windows, it really like is a big statement in such a simple way.
Talk to me about tears as a weapon, because obviously when you're doing your stand-up routine, you know what you're going to say, and there's a part there where you get emotional in it. So is that obviously by design? But
I think it's my way of justifying my emotions, because I'm quite an emotional guy. Like, the valve is open, and at any given moment, like, it will just well up and just take over, and I just have learned not to push it down. I think probably because I was an actor in training and was like, when can I cry for a role? And so that just like opened the valve, and now it'll just happen all the time. I'll just sort of be talking and then get hit by emotion and sort of cry. And because I work in comedy, which is like, you think it's the antithesis of comedy is to be crying, and I sort of like felt a bit guilty about how much I was welling up or being emotional. And but then I started working in this area of comedy where it was like trying to talk about something bigger while also trying to make people laugh. And I thought, oh, actually, tears, I don't think like weapon as in like they're a knife or a gun, but I think they're like my weapon, like as in my trick or my skill, as a way of like, when they do come up, like I don't hide them. And I think they're interesting because they make people listen in a way that maybe they weren't going to listen to originally, and maybe tune out. And so like I did this talk at it was like a dinner with all the headmasters or deputy headmasters of all boys' schools in New Zealand, and I did a big talk to them, and they're so used to these things, aren't they? Like, it's like admin, they're hearing some guy talk about it, whatever, and then I was like, again, it's just the emotions welled up, and I was like, it would be kind of unprofessional maybe to cry in front of these guys, but I'm just going to use it as my weapon and just like let them hear what I'm trying to say a bit more, and so just kind of let the emotions out and then keep talking to them, and you feel the room shift and you feel them lean forward, and you start feeling they're not like just listening, but they're connecting with you, and I guess they maybe feel sorry for you. I don't know. They see tears, they want to comfort you. I don't know. It's like a human instinct to sort of react. But then you've got them, and then they're talking to you and engaging with you, and the tears aren't fake.
Not crocodile tears.
No, I'm not manufacturing. It's just like, if I don't cry, whatever. But it's just me being genuine, I guess, out there and talking about how I genuinely feel because I went through it. And so sometimes the tears come up, and that's like our wedding was so emotional. Oh my God, I haven't cried that much in my even I was just discussing it with like the celebrant and the wedding like organizer, and we were just genuinely going through admin. I was like, the doors will open, and then I was like and then just like it hit me what was going on, and everyone's like, are you okay? Because I thought I like choked on a raisin. And I was like, no, the emotions are here. And I was like, I keep talking like the tap is on. I was like, and I can't turn the tap off. And I just like, from that moment on, I just cried for like 2 days straight.
It's the best part of the wedding, isn't it? Watching the big, strong, stoic man sort of crumble as
it's my favorite bit. But it happened from, honestly, the first 15 minutes of the wedding. I was like, welcome. So tonight, sorry. Like immediately, but Michael and I actually made a pact that we weren't going to apologize for tears. And then
good.
It actually makes people more comfortable if you're just talking and then you're like, it wells up and then you're kind of crying and then you're still kind of talking, but you're not like, I'm sorry, like, don't look at me, which I think is what we want to do. I think people are more comfortable because they're like, oh, he's just like going through something, and then they feel a bit more comfortable about watching you cry. But if you are like riddled with shame that you're showing some emotion, then I think people get more awkward around you.
Yeah. It's a funny thing that apologizing for crying because you feel something.
I know.
In a conversation, it's such an odd, when you break it down again, it's such an odd thing to kind of be sorry for.
It's really powerful to just, I find, let it out and keep talking. And I've just, over the years, do it because it just keeps welling up. And, people are like, they get tense. But if you're just like relaxing yourself and just let the tears flow while you continue to talk, then it's fine. We show a myriad of emotions all the time when we're talking. I'm like, we show anger or humor or like frustration. I mean, why can't we show like, tears? I don't even know what, like, it's not even sad sometimes. It's like, in the tears at the wedding, it was like love. It was happy tears.
It's funny reflecting on it. We've had a lot of vulnerable conversations on this podcast where guests cry and open up. And when they do it, I'm so here for it. I'm so encouraging of it. I'm like, this is great. Like, I'm great that you can feel that you can do that. And then there's been moments when I've started tearing up and get emotional. And again, I'm sort of embarrassed about it. I'm sort of, just move on. So what are we, next thing we talk about?
This doesn't usually happen to me. Yeah. I don't know what's happened. I must have broken down, or I'll go to a doctor. We'll be able to, there must be a leak in me somewhere. Yeah, it's really weird. Yeah. I don't know. But the more that, next time you do it, you should just like remember this and then just be like, don't apologize, and then just see how everyone reacts, because it's so interesting. Like, people actually feel more comfortable around you if you can just show it. And sometimes they're like, oh, fuck, is he crying? You know, like, oh, but he seems fine with it. Okay, sweet. Oh, yeah, I'm okay with it. You know, like, I think it's always, maybe that's like because I went to drama school and like literally at any given second there was someone crying in a corner.
Yeah. Hey, we won't keep you much longer because I know you got a Snort performance to get to. But Hayley
out
did.
of context is an interesting.
Yeah,
if people listen
Snort
to that.
performance.
Yeah, Snort performance.
Piles of cocaine to get through, and I'm doing it for the crowd.
Hayley did give us another story, so I assume there's got to be something good here. Said we went to India together and it was wild, and we went with a wild woman called Annie.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, there was this like Asia Pacific drama school conference, which is like up there with my headmaster's dinner of like weird things to go to. And it was being held in New Delhi, and it was like all the drama schools to like Shanghai and Taiwan, and there's no one from Australia though, weirdly, but all coming together to talk about like how do you train actors. And they could take some students over. So Hayley Sproull, myself, and Leon Wadham, who's weirdly in Lord of the Rings, the new Rings of Power, like he's a superstar now. We all put our hands up and we made this sketch comedy show that we were like, I wonder if we could do sketch comedy that was like physical comedy. So like it didn't matter what language you spoke, you could enjoy it. And so we flew over to India with this woman called Annie Ruth, who ran the drama school. And you can imagine a woman who would run a drama school and who she was. You know, like, it's just incredible woman, very inspiring, but totally honest about who she is. And just the whole experience was mad. We were like sitting down on the beds, and they were like, I got like spine shock. They were so hard. And it was just such a weird way to see India, because most people go and like eat, pray, love it over there. But we were like... perform, bend, stretch, act. But Annie, like, I love it was like the last at the airport, because like the whole conversation was like, who's going to get sick? Like, who's going to shit themselves over there? Because we just were like not experienced enough with like being over there. And I think it was Annie Ruth on the last day who was like, well, it's happened, both ends. And we were like, oh my God. But it was such an amazing experience with Hayley Sproull. It's like we've got all our photos look like we're this couple on this trip who are like madly in love. I've got these like beautiful photos of us at like the Taj Mahal together. It's so funny.
Speaking of overseas shitting yourself stories, did you do that in Japan on a bike ride?
Oh my God, how do you know that story?
Don't you worry about me.
I need to be a closed book. Oh my God. Yeah, we went to Japan. I ate some convenience store chicken because the 7-Elevens over there are just like amazing. And we went to go see these monkeys in, this is like, you're like, oh my God, what are you doing? In like a mountain somewhere. And we were like, let's cycle there. So we cycled to this like mountain. It was like a 40-minute bike. And I was like, could feel my guts kind of going crazy. And I was like, oh my God, I'm definitely, something's not right. But I was like, no, you'll be right, you're right. And you know, when you're starting to like sort of sweat, and you're like, oh no, this thing is really not good. And then I remember saying to my friends, hey guys, like, we're going to need to pull over because I'm like 100% certain I'm going to shit myself. We're like in the middle of nowhere with bikes. And I was like, okay. And they're like, what are we going to do? And I was like, okay, the options are we either find somewhere where I can do my business, or I'm just going to shit myself right here. And then you guys will need to go back and bring me some pants, and then we'll go see the monkeys. Like we're not giving up on the monkeys. And so we keep biking, and I'm just like, we're all just like picking up our face, furiously biking faster and faster. And then we see this like what I think is a convenience store. I think it's like maybe a petrol station. And I just run in. And I'm just like, is there a toilet? You know, and he's like, I don't think he speaks English. He's like pointing into a direction. I think he knows what I want. And then I run around, and it's like a Japanese, like the standing toilets. And I just had not come across one in Japan yet. And I was like, oh my God, but I didn't even have time to be like, what am I going to do here? I just like threw my pants down, like Birkenstocks on, just squat. And like, I think because one, like I had turned into a human slushy machine. And two, I was in like the optimum position to poo. Like
they know what they're doing.
They know what they're doing. It came out of me at a rate that my soul left my body. I remember just being like, like it was unbelievable. And like, didn't need to wipe, like nothing. I was just like the grand exodus. It just all came out of me like a kidney came out. Like it all came out. And I remember just being like, oh my God. And then I walked out and I was like, I feel amazing. And I remember like, I didn't shit myself on the side of the road in Japan. What more can go wrong? Like, I just felt invincible. And like the rest of the day, just like I was completely empty and my like soul was back in my body, but I just felt like I had taken like the best drugs in my life. And I was just like, oh my God, let's go see these fucking monkeys. Like, I'm not going to shit myself. This is amazing.
Oh, it's good. I'm glad one line elicited that response.
Yeah, no, that's gold. Right, not much more for me. What's next? What's on the radar?
I'm writing a sitcom, which I'm not going to talk about yet because I'm always scared that they're never going to happen. And so I'm writing it, and I'm not in it, but we're writing for other people. So a lot of writing, and then I am.
And you love that after doing the.
I'm like, the sitcom's a breeze. And then I'm making a documentary series with the spin-off that goes to air in November. So we're starting to tease it now. About the landscape of pornography in Aotearoa.
Oh, wow.
With Eli Mathewson.
Wow.
So the male gays are taking on porn. And it is...
Straight porn, gay porn, all porn?
All porn.
Right.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. I think it's going to open up a big conversation, maybe one that we're not quite ready for. Maybe even Eli and I aren't fully prepared for like what we're putting ourselves up for, but no one's talking about it. It feels like, and it's everywhere. So we thought
that'd be really well received. I think a lot of people will be watching.
I hope so.
And you've beaten Paddy Gower because it would have been Paddy Gower on porn.
I know. I was like, we're literally like, oh my God, what's he gonna do next? And I was like, he's gonna fucking announce on porn tomorrow. And because he was like Paddy Gower's next thing, and I was like, if you say on porn, I'm gonna scream because we were like deep in the trenches by that point. And he was like, on the web, and I was like, okay, it's close. He's getting closer. He's finding his way over. He's gonna be like Paddy Gower on being a gay comedian next. Like I'm just like, what? What are you doing, bro? Leave me alone. But no, we're really excited. It's a fascinating conversation. And
is it a troublesome one from what you've done initially?
Troublesome? How do you mean troublesome?
Just some of the stuff, the subject matter that you're having to navigate through.
You have to navigate all of it. So Eli and I talk about porn a lot on our podcast, just because it pops up, I guess. Sometimes, literally, it pops up on your computer screen. And so we just think it's fascinating because as gay men, it's like it was a tool to like navigate sexuality for. Like, so we don't have like negative relationships with it. And we're always like, oh, I think porn can be great. Like, it can be really beneficial to like, but it is also like, it is a big knotty subject. And so it's quite hard to talk about, and so this series is kind of looking at that as well because I don't think anyone really knows how to discuss it.
You've got a theory about porn, don't you? About undies in the shower?
Undies in the shower?
Oh yeah, I do. So this is going right back to episode 1.
Yeah.
Wow. 1998.
In sports teams, male sports teams now, there is a higher percentage of young males that shower with underwear on. So when we were coming through, it was full nudity in like trough shared showers. My theory is kids have got so much easy access to porn and their perception of what a normal sized dick is completely warped
100%.
because they're seeing these Chernobyl fucking things going in and out
100%.
and they're looking down going, well, that's not me. I'm not gonna show anybody what I'm packing.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Thank you.
I think, I mean, it probably...
If you need a researcher for this,
I mean, it's done.
Yeah.
It's in the can.
Yeah.
But, yeah, look, you're going to have to watch the series because we definitely go there. We go everywhere. Yeah, it's we cover it all and uncover it all. But also, there's still so much to talk about because it's like an endless conversation. But, yeah, I think that'll be out in November.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And last one from me. Have you collected the book advance money yet?
Finally.
Yeah.
Literally 2 weeks ago.
Really?
I didn't invoice for the advance for the book.
Ooh.
Until I'd written it. Because I was scared I wasn't going to finish it. So I was like, if I'll just...
That's very conscious,
They can keep the money and then I'll like invoice once the job's done. So I finally invoiced for it.
Must have been a nice feeling.
Yeah, it was actually, yeah.
Hey, Chris, thank you so much for giving us your time. That's been such a cool journey. It's been such a cool chat. Shay is our outro guy, so I tee him up and he delivers every time. Shay, what do you got?
Amazing conversation. I really like your point about meeting in the middle, and I think as I reflect on my journey as an adult, thinking back to some of the attitudes that I probably held as a teenager how they've changed now, and how kids coming through won't have to navigate some of that remorse about the way they felt about the homosexual community, the rainbow community. And I think it's awesome. I think it's awesome that it's being normalized. I think it's awesome that people like Buck are advocates, and it's just changing, the changing face of New Zealand, and long may it continue. And for you to be at the forefront of writing gags on Jono and Ben to now being the face and body and mannerisms of that acceptance, I think is really cool, and I'm really happy we shared some time with you tonight.
And here I am now between two beers. Who would have thought?
There you go.
Actually, I've been between two beers before, but that's a different kind of beers.
Cheers, Chris.